The right-wing activist behind Libs of TikTok has been appointed for a key position at the Oklahoma Department of Education. Top Oklahoma school official Ryan Walters has appointed Libs of TikTok head Chaya Raichik to the Library Media Advisory Committee at the State Department of Education. Libs of TikTok often post videos about LGBTQ plus teachers in schools, classifying them as groomers.
Walters said in a statement, Chaya Raichik is on the front lines showing the world exactly what the radical left is all about, lowering standards, porn in schools, and pushing woke indoctrination on our kids. Her unique perspective is invaluable as part of my plan to make Oklahoma schools safer for kids and friendlier to parents, per the Huffington Post.
It's interesting that he raises the idea of lowering standards, given that I couldn't find any evidence that this woman would be qualified to do any job in education whatsoever. And there are some obvious conflicts of interest here to have someone working on a school board that seems not to respect the basic rights of gay people in this country to even be teachers in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's the board for the library specifically. I mean, I have a hard time seeing this as anything other than of kind of own the libs stunt. I think she has, every right to post on social media criticisms of wokeness and the other things she sees. But just as I wouldn't want like Robin DiAngelo or Ibram X. Kendi on the library board because they're like deeply committed left-wing activist type people with shoddy scholarship, I similarly don't think this person who's kind of a performer social media personality.
Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo scholarship makes Raichik, I should say, makes their scholarship look like they're Nobel Prize laureates who should be esteemed above all else. They have, at the bare minimum, written books and been degreed in some areas of relevant expertise here. I mean, Raichik, this is someone who has been part of many a kind of cancel culture book ban campaign against a number of books that are considered to be classics in American literature. It really does seem like certain Republicans are pushing a kind of authoritarian overreach that has already been proven to be not especially successful politically. We're now in a realm where the candidates in the Republican primary who branded themselves largely as anti-woke candidates, both Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy, have fallen out. Even Donald Trump doesn't hit those notes as hard as those two ever did. And it seems like that lesson is slowly perhaps going to be learned in other parts of the country. We'll see what kind of local pushback there is to this clearly kind of a political appointment that doesn't seem well tailored to actually improving the education of kids in Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma ranks 48th out of 50 states for the quality of education, so they have a long way to go. Again, I don't have any problem with efforts to get to have parents exercise some control over whether there are pornographic books on the shelves or age-inappropriate material. Some of this is certainly going too far and banning or resulting in Florida and other places titles being taken off the shelves that I think are perfectly fine. This seems honestly like a case where most reasonable people can draw a clear line that, again, the one book with the picture of someone performing fellatio on a dildo is not age appropriate for the school library, and the bluest eye is fine, and we don't need to have some big fight over it, or I wish we didn't.
Unfortunately, we do, because these book bans are happening all across the country. The response to this has obviously been varied. Ken Klippenstein weighed in. Obviously, we have him on a guest in the show all the time, and he is known for doing reporting that are based on FOIA requests. He quote tweeted this story from Rolling Stone, writing, "FOIA time." That tweet has gotten over 18,000 likes, and there's a lot of pushback and anger in the replies. The obvious implication here is that because she's now a part of the government, that she is now vulnerable to getting these freedom of information requests, and who knows what that might turn up. I don't know if that's something that she wants to necessarily expose herself to. Up until this point, she's largely been a private citizen who's been able to have the protections of a private citizen.
Yeah, like I said, seems like a not particularly well thought out stunt for attention, and we should not have that I guess.
This is also a little bit of egg on your face for certain conservatives who stress the idea that Black people, women, and other minorities are not qualified for their jobs because of DEI or other affirmative action style policies. Charlie Kirk made this argument pretty loud recently, and it's interesting to think about in the context of Chaya being appointed with no qualifications whatsoever to this board in Oklahoma. Let's take a look at what Charlie Kirk had to say.
And that's why I think this United story and the DEI story hits so hard, because we've all been in the back of a plane when the turbulence hits, or when you're flying through a storm and you're like, I'm so glad I saw the guy with the right stuff and the square jaw get into the cockpit before we took off. And I feel better now thinking about that.
No, I mean, like, you want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a Black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't have done that before.
That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying, though, is that because of, and I don't know that this is what is in place at United, but because of affirmative action or race-based hiring or admissions, it causes some people to wrongly and unfairly question whether people who are admitted or hired under those specifications are then not as qualified as other people, which is very, I'm sure, damaging and racist toward those people, which is why we just shouldn't practice. We should practice colorblind hiring and admissions.
Well, I think it really demonstrates a lot of ignorance about what the affirmative action process actually is. The point is that if you have two qualified candidates, you can then move to other factors to try to get more demographic diversity or economic diversity, people who are poor, people who are from different parts of the country, things like that, at least when we're talking about college admissions. If you want to live in a world where people, everybody in college.
That's not how it's worked for college admissions.
It is how it's worked. That's literally, quota systems were made unconstitutional in the 1970s, so that's quite literally how affirmative action policies work.
I mean,
and certainly Black pilots have to, and Black pilots have to pass all of the same laws and regulations and rules, obviously, as white pilots.
Up until the court decisions in the early 2000s, they used systems that assigned points to people based on race.
Right, that's not a quota system. So stands true.
No, that's not equally qualified people.
Yes, it is. If you pass a bare minimum assessment of what it qualifies you to get into a school, like what I said, you can then move. Well, I'm talking more broadly than school. I'm talking about pilot things.
You got more points for your race than your ACT and SAT score. That is absolutely true.
That's not true, Robbie.
It is in fact true.
When you look at who is admitted to these, first of all, I know you'd love for this racist statement from from Charlie Kirk to be not the subject of the conversation. But what we're talking about is Charlie Kirk saying that pilots who attain the exact same number of flight hours and pass the exact same tests to become pilots, who have no indication that their track record of crashes is higher than anybody else. As you pointed out in a recent episode, the number of planes that actually go down are so incredibly low that it's a statistical anomaly in the first instance. And I couldn't find any instances in which a Black pilot was involved, despite all of in a crash. Despite all of that, Charlie Kirk still feels comfortable saying that he is going to cast judgments and be concerned about whether or not he's going to die when he's in a plane piloted by a Black person. And instead of looking at that and saying, well, maybe I should revise how I'm judging other people of minority backgrounds and other aspects of my life, and that is my own internalized bigotry and racism, he's justifying it in a very similar way that you seem to be justifying it here, saying the reality of affirmative action compels me to have a racist view as I carry out my life. And all of that in the face of obvious evidence that, for example, Raichik, with no qualifications, is being appointed to an important district position in Oklahoma.
Well, what did I say?
And no evidence.
Do that.
And also with the evidence that something like 40%, I don't know, it's not something like, actually 40% of Harvard admittees, people who are admitted to Harvard, are either legacies or athletes.
And they shouldn't do that either.
But no one is...
What do you mean no one? Here I am, a person saying that all those things were a bad idea.
No one outside of this table, the overwhelming force of the attacks from people like Charlie Kirk and the people from his political cohort are attacking affirmative action. Whereas Charlie Kirk or Christopher Rufo launched a national political campaign against legacy, not performatively saying, oh, legacies are bad too, the way that you've just done, but actually asking for segments to be produced on this show, which has never happened, on the legacy crisis. I don't see people in the wings saying, "Oh, we got to do another legacy segment," because it's such an unconscionable slight on the American education system that so many people, poor, stupid, rich kids, are getting allowed into school because their parents happen to go to those same kinds of schools. That is absolutely not the kind of conversation we're having, and it's worth asking the question why the focus is specifically on race and at sometimes gender and very much so LGBTQ people, and not ever on the bulk of the college classes, which are made up of people who don't deserve to be there because their parents are rich.
There was a legal justification for fighting it on the race grounds, given that racial discrimination is illegal and discrimination based on legacy status is not. I would be absolutely fine for all of those policies to be stripped away, and I've called for them to be stripped away over and over again. I support them being stripped away. So what are we having an argument about?
But your contention is that there's no way to get rid of legacy programs.
You want to get rid of the legacy programs and keep the race-based admissions.
No, your contention just there is there's no way to get rid of legacy.
I want to get rid of both of them.
Your contention just there is that there's no way to get rid of a legacy program because it is not legacy status is not a constitutionally protected status, and therefore we shouldn't try to change policies in the United States of America.
No, I didn't say we shouldn't try to change policies. I think that's why they brought lawsuits over the race.
No, then
stuff.
What is the excuse for not having people like Christopher Rufo ever trying to challenge those kind of policies? There are many ways to challenge them.
Because there wasn't a legal justification to do it.
That's not true. You're saying that you can only challenge something if it's a constitutionally protected class. There's not any other kind of lawsuit that can be brought. There's not any other kind of protest movement that can happen.
We can't do X until we do Y, and if we do, like,
what are you talking about?
This is the same thing as but we can't hold anyone accountable for plagiarism until we have Alan Dershowitz hauled before a committee or something.
What are you talking about? We should hold everybody accountable for plagiarism. Wrong. I've said that a million times.
They should not practice racial discrimination in hiring or admissions. They fought the law forbids it, and a group of people who had been discriminated against in concert with conservative scholars, activists, and groups, etc., fought to establish that policy, which I agree.
All right.
Sorry.
Well,
tough.
You agree. You and Charlie Kirk of one mind on this one. I see. More right.
No. No, I did not say that. And
how is your argument different from Charlie Kirk's? That because of the existence of DEI programs, it's not my fault that I think that black pilots are worse and they're going to crash my plane.
I did not say that I think that black pilots are worse. Frankly, you're correct that the statistics for crashing planes are zero. They're perfectly safe. They're virtually zero. The last
a woman was sucked out of a plane like two to 4 years ago.
And 40,000 people died in car traffic in the last year. Like, we got to put things in perspective. Planes are extremely safe.
Well, you're the one that's claiming it's zero. I'm not saying it's not extremely safe. It's just not zero. So what's your point?
It's extremely safe, and so the pushback I would give is that there's no point scaring people into thinking planes are going to follow the sky because there's a black pilot or for any reason. They're just not. It's very safe. But
there is a point in scaring someone out of thinking, oh my gosh, this professor is black, and therefore my kid's going to die in a Harvard classroom because the dean is a black person.
Well, no one is saying that.
Well, they literally are. The political force is to focus on whether or not it is somehow a terrifying problem, something that needs to be on the front page of the New York Times for weeks at a time.
It's just wrong.
Because of affirmative action. That's what it is. And the stakes of a black person becoming a professor or a student in a classroom are obviously so much lower than what we're talking about with pilots. So why is it then that there's so much agita around it is the question. I don't understand how you can have a lower standard for pilots and say, well, they're just pilots, and I guess I can accept that it's racist to say that pilots are equally safe, but not similarly understand that the margins of errors and the risk assessment and what the stakes are so much lower in all of these other kinds of contexts.
I don't follow what you're saying. The people should be hired not based on the color of their skin.
Yes,
it's as simple
and
as
regrettably, what the big part of this story that's being missed out is that study after study after study shows that people are being hired on the basis of the color of their skin, and those people are white people, and that people of color are systemically discriminated against in the hiring context. If you take the exact same resume and change the names on it, so the one is a black identified name and one is a white identified name, the black identified name not only gets hired at less frequency, they get discriminated against in the housing lottery, housing application process, and on down the line. But we want to live in a country where we say that kind of discrimination, because it's tacit and not explicit, gets allowed, and any efforts to remedy that are racist because they're not colorblind. And that's the scenario that we're in now.
We can't make illegal people's innate racial feelings, but we can get rid of explicit policies aimed at curbing the number of college campuses Asian people allowed to go there. And it is a good thing that we did that. I'm happy we did it. I hope we continue.
You can address people's innate racial biases.
We can re-educate them in...
We did so with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which maybe you don't agree with. Maybe you don't think that was right and that we shouldn't have protected classes in the first place.
I think that would probably be better not to have protected classes at all.
So again, I'm not really seeing a lot of room for disagreement with you here and the arguments that are being made by Charlie Kirk.
All right, well, you can decide for yourself, audience. More Rising right after this.